Hey everybody, welcome to the Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal, and I'm joined today by DJ Wooldridge of
Hey,
Only
that's
Stupid
me.
Answers and everything else you've seen this dude on. DJ, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we're fine. We were just talking about it. Like I don't think we've really connected until prior to the pandemic. So I'm glad this worked out.
Exactly. I think it's funny actually how many colleagues across the world we've like touched base with or known and been like, "Hey man, are you cool? Yeah, we're okay. All right, good." And then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad we're finally, like you said, I'm able to just kind of reconnect and connect with the audience and be like, "Yo, you know this dude, and maybe your dudes know my face. Who knows?" But I'm happy that we're making it happen. I like the synergy.
Amen.
But dude, what is happening with you, and what are you excited to talk about before we get into the show, so to speak?
Like you talked about, I do the podcast Only Stupid Answers. We're looking forward to having you on soon. But the big thing is hellbentcomicbook.com. It's my new comic. It's my new creator-owned comic on Kickstarter. Currently, I co-wrote it with my good friend Jana July. If the people that listen to your show are fans of like classic Vertigo comics like Preacher or Sandman or any of those books, it's very much in the same vein. It follows a trans woman with incredible supernatural abilities that has to go on the run from an evil cult. And she has to team up with an arcane assassin to escape and survive. They're going to have to work together to survive. And so Jezzy is our lead. And she's discovering all these incredible powers that people want to use to kind of destroy the world. Right. And so Nick is the assassin that was actually meant to capture her and now is working with her to escape the people that were after her. And I like to compare Nick, I call Nick like a combination of John Wick and John Constantine.
Nice.
Which somebody correctly pointed out that Keanu Reeves also played Constantine. So it already,
oh my God.
Yeah. It's already kind of in there. But yeah, so it's full of like, on the one hand, it's a very inclusive, positive comic. On the other hand, there's a lot of violence and sex and drugs and all of that stuff, which to me, that was always kind of my experience reading those classic Vertigo books. Yeah, because in a lot of ways they pushed boundaries in a way that allowed for characters and stories that didn't exist in the mainstream. And of course, a lot of those stories, the ones that made headlines, were like the violence and sex parts of it, but it was also in more positive ways as well. Yeah. And so that it wasn't until like promoting it that I realized like, oh yeah, this is in a lot of ways, this is like a spiritual successor to those books. And Jane and I were just on another show talking about it. And she brought up that we wrote the comic that we wanted to read because the comics are in some ways bigger than they have been in a long time, but they're still not that, there's not quite stuff like this anymore, to the point where, like, you might remember when Mark Russell was writing Second Coming, Vertigo bailed on the book. And it's like, you're the publisher that did Preacher. Like, what's happening?
Is that too hot for DC? Are you kidding me?
So just this is the comic we want to make. It's people are really excited about it. We are funded. We are working on our second stretch goal. That said, we're, as of this recording, we're only a few days from the end of the campaign. So if you want the comic, now, one, you do. I'm telling you, you do. You're going to love it. I just was going over art today and working on a final draft for the script before it goes to the letter. It's great. You're going to love it. But you only have a few more days. Not only that, but there's a few tiers where you can get my previous comic, Chaos Theory Zombies versus Dinosaurs Volumes 1 and 2. And that's my original inventory. I did it originally went so quick I had to pull out all my inventory and do a count up, like, okay, how much do I really have? I was able to add,
give this away.
I was able to add a few more copies, but that's it. Once those tiers are gone and they are limited and they're going fast, there's no more Chaos Theory.
Over.
Yeah. So if you
grab that then, because I missed the first one, so I'm excited to jump on that.
Yeah,
I've not packed it yet.
Yeah, there's two Chaos Theory tiers, and yeah, that's it for the original inventory. So if you want Hellbent, now's the time. If you also want Chaos Theory, now is also the time. Nice.
Yeah, I will say, if you actually take a look at the Kickstarter page, you'll see like art and actually a great elevator pitch, and you get to know the creators and everything. The art reminds me so much of classic Vertigo, where it's not just like cool or new. It has that kind of like that grit that you miss from like a a subversive dollar bin comic book from yesteryear that you're like, this is what we're missing. The newest model for independent comic book creation and subversive entertainment, there's a little bit more polish than there used to be, right? Like, don't you feel that way? I mean, I appreciate it because there's some gold out there, you
100%.
Yeah, I mean, something's Only Children, Once in the Future, a lot of stuff actually from Boom, which is kind of surprising because Boom was like this publisher that came out of nowhere and was like, oh, this is for kids, and you're like, what?
Yeah, isn't Boom doing We Only Find Them When They're Dead?
Yes, they are. Yeah, that's another one where it's like, and it's from these creators whose names you see and have done some pretty dope stuff over the big two, but also have these like really either bombastically huge but still kind of independent stories to tell, but also are breaking genres. But they're clean, they're beautiful in some cases. I mean, like nobody would have had Dan Mora on Batman until they saw Once in Future, and yet there's just there's something about like an old Steve Dillon, you know?
And that's kind of like we looked at with Heather Vaughn. She worked on a lot of the art for a lot of like tabletop RPGs and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
And we reached out to a bunch of artists. There are definitely some like A-list artists that have an email from me sitting in their spam folder just to see, hey, like, do you want to collaborate?
Right?
I just figured you want to ask. But Heather was on board and she gave us, we had her do the first 6 pages, and it was just like, this is kind of, because the story has it toes that line, like again, the Preacher Sandman, that toes that line of being grounded while dealing with more fantastic cosmological things. Totally. And so you want, when you have a giant horse demon, you want it to feel grounded in a way, and her art does that. And so it was really, and it kind of set the tone for everything we've got. So Heather Vaughn is on interiors, we've got Ellie Wright on colors, Haley Rose Lyon on letters, and then we've got incredible variant covers by Danny and Nicole Gu, who just did great work. And I love writing, but it's also really cool when you see the art come in and you see like
thing. And that's do you draw at all, or is it just writing? Because I'm just a writer.
Same. I drew a lot as a kid, and it's hard, and so I stopped.
That's it. I just maybe you're like me, where when we were growing up, that like you loved comics or you loved entertainment and you wanted to create it yourself, and you knew that like there's no one else that's going to listen to your ideas, so you just kind of like, I got to do it myself. You start drawing, but then you reach this limit. You know, like you hit the wall, and you're like, either I'm going to be doing this forever and like 20 hours a day, and I might never do better, or I'm just going to stop and find another focus. And like for me, I think age 12, I was like, I'm done. Maybe I'll draw pictures in your mind with writing.
Yes. Well, it's tough to. In a lot of ways, I wish I'd stuck with it. In that, just because you get to do it all, you know what I mean? But it is so to do it well, it takes such a skill. Like you said, that you have to like be willing to put in the work, and my hand hurt, my hand cramped when I did it, and so I stopped. But it's fortunately we have a bunch of fantastic collaborators on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this. Because I was just thinking about you talking about the horse demon, and I was like, man, you're absolutely right. You got to make it grounded, but also horse demon, how awesome. And also your poor artist, because horses are some of the hardest things to draw.
Yes. You don't even know. I wish I should have sent you. If you guys go to, I think it's cbr.com, there's kind of like an early preview of the first 6 pages. I also put a link in one of the updates on the campaign, so you'll see it there. But the second page, when I've been on people's shows, especially if I'm there in person, I've been showing them the second page, because it is a horse demon, but let's say it's a well-endowed horse demon. And so if you're familiar with Saga and some of the stuff that got away with in Saga, and that was a conversation I had to have with Jaina, my co-writer, because when Heather sent us art, I was like, is this okay? Because we wrote it, and then you realize like, oh yeah, they let Brian K. Vaughan get away with this because he's Brian K. Vaughan. Are we gonna? Is this okay?
Yeah. Are we gonna be lumped into a different category?
Yeah.
That's fair. That's a fair question. That's
so
funny.
yes,
Also,
the point is, yes, it was a hard page for her to draw.
oh, I'm sure. Yeah, for a myriad reasons.
Yeah.
I'm also. It's funny when you're creating and you're just kind of like, yeah, it was cool in my head because it's but then I have to make someone draw this, or just someone has to pour their talent into it, and then you look at this really awesome thing and you're like, that's so stupid. I'm so sorry I made you do this. But that's so great also because like if you pitch Saga cold to a non-comic reader, everything sounds ridiculous and like not even worth checking. It's just kind of like, yeah, there's these race of people with TV heads and they deal with people with wings, and you're like, what? Come on. But you have to look at it, you have to experience it. Even then, like I remember the ads for Saga and I'm like, oh my god, Brian K. Vaughan's at it again, here we go. But then you read it and it's like it just stabs you through the heart, like issue 1.
Yep, and a lot of that too is with Fiona Staples, and that's like the key. This is this is like the third comic I've worked on, and it's just so important to get not just a good artist, but the right artist. And honestly, that's truthfully, people always ask me like, what do I need to know? Get in the comic. That's where the money goes. If you're not doing the art, like Jane and I are. This campaign is doing really well. It's not doing well enough that she and I are going to see any money from it. No. It's all going to our team and to shipping it out to you all. So please go please contribute, so we can get that second stretch goal. But that's important, and it's like that's, and you try to the art is it's a visual. It is, comics are interesting because they are you read the word balloons, and sometimes some are more text driven than others, but it is a text based medium, but it is very much a visual medium too. And so finding that balance that works for you, works for the story, it's an interesting balance to strike.
Yes, absolutely. Who does a beautiful mesh of that, and I'm sure he's right in the back of your head, is Daniel Warren Johnson.
Love it. This, like, just I've been his Better Ray Bill book.
He's a warrior poet. Just Wonder Woman Dead Earth with this mesh of of metal and music and art and onomatopoeia, where he incorporates it into the art, where it's like and it's not even like he tries to approximate a sound effect where it's like like SHOOM or something like that. He'll just write whoosh or grab.
It's like and it conveys the feeling. I love his work. We had actually I was lucky enough to have him on the show and talk to him a little bit about Wonder Woman Dead Earth. And great dude, really cool to talk to. But you're right, and that's the other reason why you might feel similarly, like, oh man, I wish I'd stuck with the art, because if you think about some of the all-time great, I mean, there's writers, obviously Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, legends.
Yes.
But you think about some of the greatest creators, and I would put Daniel Warren Johnson in there, Darwin Cook. They're people that can, because you'll have writers that did art.
Yes.
And you have artists that will try to write, and it's okay. But the people that can find, like, I think the Darwin Cooks and the Daniel Warren Johnsons that are not only it's all one cohesive thing.
Yes, I like to call them storytellers, because they just managed to they're the total package.
It's so enviable, and just like you said, like the little like grab or whatever, and the motion and the action on the page. I don't think there's a better artist that does action than Daniel Warren Johnson. If you, I guess,
not working today.
Minor spoilers for the most recent issue of Better Ray Bill. That final shot of Surtur coming up, like, oh my god!
For me, it was the double page of the fist blasting through this fleet of shit. I'm like, it's just like, what do you like? Why isn't he on everything that needs to be dope? Like, I get, like, I wouldn't necessarily put him on like a mainstream Batman book or even a Spider-Man book, but every book that needs to be dope as F is that dude. And people like him, people in that wheelhouse who are just like, who you don't see everywhere. Like, I get, every time anybody is like, oh, I got a big project I want to do, you want to get Alex Ross. And it's like, of course you do, because Alex Ross, oh, God tier. But, he's a very specific style, like I as well as I do, Earth X. Kind of a divisive book for me as a kid, because I remember it being advertised, and by advertised, I mean, I think they came up with the idea in a Wizard magazine where they were like, wouldn't it be cool if you Kingdom Come Marvel? And Alex Ross like, yeah, it would be cool. Here's some neat ideas. And he drew up these concept art, and then they gave it to, God, what is it? He just passed away.
I don't know who wrote Earth X. I don't know.
Who wrote Earth X was, I think that was I think that was Busick, but
Okay, yeah.
But the artist on that book was not Alex Ross, and I remember being kind of disappointed. But then you actually like dig into it, and it's just like it's such a different tone, and it's such a gritty, visceral piece of art, and you're like, oh, like Jim Kruger.
Yeah.
But like, damn, does it look different? And it's like, good. I'm glad Alex Ross didn't do it. It would have been too pretty. It would have been too. It would have been too beautiful. And that's not what Earth X is. So you understand why, like, you don't see people like Daniel Warren Johnson on something like that, but they should be. And you're kind of like, there are enough projects for them.
Yeah, and you look at if Murder Falcon and the emotion that he was able to put in that, like that really wild story, a crazy story.
Yeah.
And I still want that. I still want, like, Skybound does action figures, man. I want that Murder Falcon action figure. They need to make it. I think they're working on a Murder Falcon follow up, and so I really want, just give me that action figure, please and thank you.
Yeah, definitely. When you were growing up and you broke into getting into kind of like the Vertigo style and the Vertigo comics, what was one of your introductory books? What was one of the books that you were like, oh my God, I didn't know comics could do this or be like this?
It would be later in life. I grew up in kind of a sheltered household, so I didn't get exposed to a lot of that stuff until I moved to college.
That's fair.
My big, like a lot of kids, I was into comics as a kid, and then you want girls to like you, so I stopped.
Bingo.
And then by around the college time, it didn't matter, and so I got, with Dark Knight coming out. I very specifically remember Grant Morrison was doing Batman R.I.P., and so I picked that up, and it blew my mind.
Sure.
And then at the same time, Brian Azzarello did his Joker graphic novel with Lee Bermejo.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, they're so different, but I read them at the same time, and it was this revelation of like, oh, comics can do this. I didn't know. And so Joker led me to 100 Bullets, and that was my big breakthrough with Vertigo, because 100 Bullets is still to this day one of my all-time favorite comics. I remember seeing Eduardo Riso, the artist on that book, at Comic-Con, and I got a picture with him, and I got him to sign stuff, and it was just a dude at a booth. He was just doing his thing, but for me it was such a big moment. It was like, oh my God.
I have the exact same experience with creators where I want to take a picture with them, but they're just like 50-year-old men who are just standing behind a card table, and they're like, I'm not a rock star.
I'm not like Arthur Adams, who's going to have like a line around the booth. I'm like, you don't, but that doesn't matter to me. You're one of the big ones for me.
Right. Exactly.
So it was 100 Bullets. And then I think I finally read Watchmen in college, which is technically, I think, a pre-Vertigo book.
Yeah.
And that was one of those, I think I'd held off because it was one of those, things that was so hyped up. I'm like, it can't live up to the hype. And then you read, I'm like, oh, actually it can. Actually, legitimately, it really can. And so then after, it was just off to the races of picking up everything. So like Preacher, Sandman. I'm trying to think. Vertigo. So now for people that are reading comics now, Image, a lot of what Image does now is what Vertigo was doing back in the day.
Yeah, that's where it had to go. I remember people talking about how sad it was that like Vertigo died, and I'm like, it is sad that DC never made it valuable after the 90s, and but also, why would I ever go there? Like, why, if I'm an independent creator and I want to do a dope ass book, why would I ever go to DC and give up any rights to anything when I could go to Image and like get a TV or movie deal also?
Yeah, I mean, and also point of reference, Sweet Tooth, which just dropped on Netflix, was originally a Vertigo book.
Yes, that's right.
But yeah, 100%. You'd go to Image where you have full control. And it is interesting you brought up the environment's so different now, because it's kind of like it used to be. You break into comics, into the mainstream, the big two, through indie comics, and now it's like a lot of those creators take their clout and are moving into indie. And so it's like even when Kickstarter, it's one of those, like, you're gonna do a Kickstarter and then you see like Jeff Lemire has one that made like $1 million, and you're like, all right, dude,
get the hell out of here, come on.
Listen, in his defense, I backed it. I love his work with Cosmic Detective, Matt Kint, like Ether. I love that book, so I was like, begrudgingly, I was like, here's my money, even though it's like when you see like a Matthew McConaughey start a podcast, it's like, you son of a bitch.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm watching John Krasinski talking about the good news, and I'm like, Yeah. Every day is a good day for you, buddy.
Yeah.
But yes, I backed Scott Snyder's when he did Noctera. I was like, yeah, all right, Scott.
You know, it's tough. You love what you love, and even though you might have questions about it, not even necessarily qualms, but questions, you're like, well, but I still love it, so whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I remember people, well, growing up reading comics back in the day when I was a kid, I got through comics thanks to superheroes and thanks to their public exposure. You know, like I was a Batman fan before I read it. Actually, I think one of my first Batman comics was like an original, Golden Age Batman comic from like someone's China hutch, just being like, here, read this, go away.
And as a kid, you put it through a paper shredder, and it turns out that was like worth $100,000.
You know that more than you're letting up. You know, but it was Batman, it was Spider-Man. Every time I think of like what my first exposure to Spider-Man was, there's some like foam paper plane with Spider-Man printed on it that they used to make. I don't know. It's but it's like pop culture. It's just like it's disposable garbage culture and not like comic books. And so I would get into comics that way, and I got like Marvel and DC and all that stuff. And I remember growing up reading Wizard magazine, and that magazine was just like, you got to read Scud the Disposable Assassin, you got to read Concrete. You got to read these books. I'm like, what is this? Like, it's not even subversive. It's just completely bizarre.
Yeah.
And just being exposed to it. I didn't even pick up a copy of like Strangers in Paradise until I was actually almost married. Because I was just like, okay, I don't think so. But at this point, and then she was reading it. I'm like, all right, Terry Moore, you got me. It's great.
He's stunning. Motor Girl was actually my introduction to Terry Moore, and it's just like, oh my, this is fantastic.
Yeah. But then everybody, you say you like comics, and then somebody who is gonna. It's just like when I was growing up, and I was like, I think I like Metallica, and the freaking dude, long hair, metalhead, is just like, oh, you do you? First of all, they're a bunch of sellouts, and third, here's everything. And like, oh, okay. I guess I don't know anything. But indie comics, the same deal. Where my buddy was like throwing Preacher at me, and I'm like, I opened the first page, I'm like, gross, no.
Yeah.
And then you actually dig through it, and it's like actually a super sappy romance story, and you're like, oh my god, how beautiful. And then you try to sell it, and you find you're doing the same hard sell as everybody else, where you're like, hey, read this beautiful story that has a lot of inappropriate shit in it.
A lot. Yeah, it was interesting. Like Garth Ennis has come up a lot in the conversations about our comics, especially like with Boys on the Air or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And it's like a big pull from Preacher is kind of the irreverence of like not necessarily taking, you're dealing with heavy. There's a lot of religious elements. Jane and I have been friends since high school, and we went to the same church together. So we're kind of pulling from the same source material essentially.
Yes.
And so that kind of a reverence with all of that religiosity from Preacher, but not quite as misanthropic as Garth Ennis gets. We have a little bit of hope for humanity in there.
Well, that's the thing. I think with Garth, he got more cynical as he got older, and
it happens to Frank Miller. Good example of that.
Frank's funny. I think he's actually gone so far. He's gone out the other side.
I agree. I think you're right, because there was a point where it's like, oh my god, need to avoid Frank Miller, and now it's like, oh, maybe he's okay. Maybe he's leveled out.
Yeah. Did you read the Golden Child or whatever it was?
No,
the most recent Dark Knight sequel.
No. I Frank Miller stuff never quite clicked for me, so I don't have like I'm not
willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that
not necessarily the benefit of the doubt, but like, since I came, because with my upbringing, I came to a lot of these more adult comics late. Watchmen aged perfectly for me reading. Dark Knight Returns, not quite as well. Like just from an aesthetic, the for me it was a little it didn't quite grab me the way I could totally see, like if you were used to like the Adam West Batman 66, like this is a complete paradigm upheaval.
Yeah. That is exactly what it was. Because for me, it was Batman was a cultural icon and not necessarily a comic book character. And the books that I was reading were like Alan Grant Batman books from the 80s and 90s, and it was like it was almost there. Like Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil ended up being more gritty than Alan Grant at some points, and you're kind of like, oh, this is hokey, but it's trying, it wants to be kind of, oh, it's pretty dark. And then, and your only real like multimedia exposure outside of the Tim Burton movies is Batman 66, and you pick
Well,
up
and even the
Dark
Tim
Knight.
Burton movies are pretty.
Pretty dark.
Love them, great,
but they are campy.
They're campy. That's part of the fun.
Absolutely, yeah. No, if you turn the sound off, Batman 89 is this beautiful, gorgeous comic book, and then, but if you turn it back on, you hear Prince, and you get like Jack Nicholson just chewing every scene. But every time, it's funny. Every time I think about Batman 89, I'm like, do I really like that movie? And then someone will tweet a photo, like a still from the movie, and I'm like, oh my god, what a beautiful fucking movie! Like Batman's never looked better than this one shot, despite the fact that he can't turn his neck.
He can't turn his neck. But listen, these are the sacrifices we make. It was funny. I was on somebody the Meaning Of podcast, and we were talking about Keanu Reeves' Constantine. And I was like, I feel like that was because that was like right at the cusp of, it was where studios were still a little bit afraid to commit to straight up superheroes.
Totally.
So we're coming out of like The Crow. That's why like when Batman 89 came out, like they weren't like, let's do all these movies. They were like The Shadow, Phantom,
Tank Girl. We can't do like Green Lantern.
Yeah, that's crazy. So right before that, but it was also the last opportunity you kind of had to take the source material and treat it as like a template that you do your own thing off of. Yeah. Because now, and I think this actually might have more to do with the Harry Potter franchise than comics, but now you have to have this absolute 100% fidelity to the source material. Yeah. That you get a little bit more freedom with superhero comics because there's been 50 billion different versions of these characters. So as long as it connects to one of them, you're probably fine. Yeah. But like, it was your last chance to be like, using it like, okay, here's what they did in the comic, let's do this with it, and you're not allowed to do that anymore. No. Although it's funny how, if depending on what level of clout you have, you can't, like Nolan clearly is just like, I'm gonna do Long Halloween, but then it just becomes my own thing. It just turns into a Nolan movie after a while. Like Dark Knight is almost Long Halloween, but he's like, I'm not gonna do all that fucking comic book shit. Yeah. I'm doing another one of my Interstellar movies, and it's like, oh, okay, Batman's barely in this movie. But yes, like you look at Tank Girl or The Shadow or The Phantom or any other movie from the 90s that, like, for whatever reason they were like, let's do a comic book movie, and I'm like, why? You clearly hate them. Yeah. You clearly don't want to. Although I have a lot of nostalgia for the Phantom movie, in particular, and I was, when they talk about like, oh, they made Batman Forever because Batman Returns scared kids. Yeah. I was one of the kids that scared. So I was way on board with Batman Forever because I'm nobody's biting off anybody's nose in this one. So I really did. I remember being in the theater and actually hiding. I never saw him bite his nose until I was an adult. Well, same, because I don't know if the same thing happened with you. The way I remember it, he bites the guy's nose clean off. There's blood everywhere. I do remember it like that. And you see as an adult, and it's like he bites it and there's blood, and you're like, oh, that was barely anything. Yeah. No, I do remember in the theater, like it blasting everywhere. And it could be because he says gushing blood. It could be the Mandela effect, and maybe you and I slid to the same reality where Tim Burton got to do what he wanted to do. Maybe they did it in post, or they're like, oh, the VHS release, we're going to clean it up. I don't think so, but but I do. My mind as a kid, it just becomes this huge, and we were scared. We didn't really see it, and it becomes this whole thing. But and it's not until you go back as an adult and you're like, oh yeah, man, Batman Returns is pretty lit. Yeah, it is. Yeah, every scene with Michelle Pfeiffer is freaking amazing. I was actually enthralled between Bruce and Selena on the couch in Wayne Manor, where I'm just like watching them, like these two insane people flirt with each other. Yeah, and I'm like, this is actual cinema. Like, I'm really like, I'm just, this is amazing. How did I miss this? It's like, oh right, because the last time I saw it was like 1996. Yeah, I was literally a child. Yeah, exactly. I was literally not old enough to watch this movie. Yeah, but you're right. I think that Harry Potter kind of like indicated, well. And as well, the language of Hollywood and how it's like leveraging built-in audiences and kind of like measuring your success based on, it's a roulette game at the end of the day. And if you can like weigh the
the spinner in any way, you will. And if it's like, that there's like, well, the book sales are this and the people love the books, so if we tailor it more to the books, we'll at least keep these people happy, and then hopefully those people will tell their friends and we'll get double what they have there.
Well, there's been a whole cottage industry built up that you and I are in some ways the beneficiary of Marvel relying on the fact that they can just throw Thanos in the scene of it in the movie, and dicks like us will pop up to explain to our friends who the fuck that is. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the movie doesn't. The movie doesn't get. Yeah, the movie doesn't. So
I'm waiting for Kang to show up in Loki and being like, oh, you need to know who that purple-faced guy is.
Yeah, wow. I've been talking to some friend, doing the reviews and whatever, and some people have been like, well, I just don't think it'll be Kang because they haven't introduced him. I'm like, what franchise have you been watching for the past 10 years?
Thanos is literally the end of Avengers, and they gave no context for that dude. He's wearing the whole thing too. He's got a silly tiara, and people are like, that's awesome. I'm like,
yeah, and they knew our friends would turn to us and be like, who? And we'd be like,
that literally happened. I remember seeing X2 in, like, I got a group of friends. We're all watching this movie that was at the time like one of the best comic book movies made in the past decade, and it was like super cool and a lot of fun. And then that last shot of like the silhouette of the Phoenix under the water, and then it cuts to black, and then immediately they turn to me and they're like, all right, so what's up with the Phoenix? I know something about the Phoenix. And I go, well, it all really starts with the dethroned queen of the Shi'ar Empire named Alantra. And they're like, shut up. Never mind.
I just wanted to know what the Firebird was.
Yeah, thankfully, Brett Ratner didn't know either, and so we got something else.
Yeah, man, it's a bummer that they kind of shit the bed on 2 Phoenix projects now, because I feel like Marvel's not going to revisit that for maybe ever, and it's a bummer because they have
it's so dope.
It's the same thing that was frustrating with the fact that like all the stuff with Venom. Yeah. Because now you actually have a Spider-Man movie where you can, because Spider-Man literally goes to space in an event. Yeah. And so he could come back with the suit. Like, you can actually do the story. And it's the same thing with Phoenix. It's a bummer that they're probably not going to touch that story, because like that could be your big X-Men Guardians of the Galaxy crossover is the Phoenix saga. Yeah. And we would give you all of the money. You would have all of it.
and people would think you were geniuses. Yeah. And it's all just, well, no, I mean, really just these few dudes did it like 30 years ago, and I just stole it. And it's like, then that's the thing that drives me crazy whenever they make a comic book movie, and I go like, it's right there. Just, you're clearly lazy. Just make the thing on the page, like, and it doesn't have to be 1-to-1. I get it, but like, if you're clearly uncreative, just do the thing on the page and just make it look better than that, and that's all you have to do. It's so easy. The template's right there before you. But yeah, I'm in the same camp. I mean, like, wouldn't it be cool for X-Men to like, starts, it's kind of grounded. It's just the same thing with X-Men, because it's just like, it's grounded. It's it's about the culture and society and race and sexual orientation, and then they go to the stars, and it turns out your main character, his dad's a space pirate, and his girlfriend is a clone, and she's made with this Firebird. Like, why not? Yeah. If people go to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and they're like, and non-comic book readers are like, do you think Uatu will show up? Do you think Galactus will be in this movie? Do you think they'll have a Silver Surfer cameo? You've got them. You've got them. You can do it all. You can Ego is the main bad guy. Yeah, you can do literally anything. I do hope with X-Men that they're paying attention to what's happened in the past year, because because I think there's a really good opportunity. I'm like a lot of people, when Jonathan Hickman started his run, and for those that might not be familiar, the X-Men have basically literally every mutant that you've ever read in a comic book has teamed up to start their own mutant nation on Krakoa. And it's a big sci-fi it's basically like Alien Nation. Like it's X-Men as if they're aliens on our Earth, and it's a cool story. Yes. But a lot of people were like, oh, this should be the basis for the Marvel movies. And I'm like, bullshit, what? It should be. Like, because I'm in the same camp. No.
Yeah. Because it doesn't touch on what the X-Men touch on. And I think what the X-Men talk about, this idea of being an outsider, this idea of being marginalized, is more valuable, let me rephrase that, as valuable now as it has ever been. Right. And if you look at, not to get too much into this, but if you look at people protesting, and they'll throw a water bottle, in response you get tear gas and flashbangs and all that. And then you say the government knows that any one of those people might be able to shoot lasers out of their eyes. Yeah. You're like, oh, yes, those Sentinels would get made in a day. All the defense budget would go to Sentinels, and that would be, and you're like, yeah, that's the world we live. Like, the X-Men are more valuable now than ever. Totally. And it also gets to be an opportunity to be like, hey, you know how the Avengers are basically a bunch of white dudes. X-Men, literally everything that's not in the Avengers is every person that's not represented in the Avengers is an X-Men now.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Not just race, but like most people's favorite X-Men are women.
Mm-hmm.
Most people's favorite female Marvel superhero is an X-Man.
Yeah.
And it's like X-Men managed to do that 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. And so just take advantage of it. I hope they don't get bogged down with all the
continuity.
All the continuity. And that's another thing, like people are like, is it going to be like the changing reality? It's like, no, literally, no, we didn't know mutants existed. Now we do.
That's all.
We're moving on.
Thank you. See, that's the thing, is that's the language we speak. It's cleaner.
Yeah.
Don't complicate it. I mean, like, was Evan Peters as Quicksilver for a hot second until it wasn't a fun Easter egg? Sure. Do I like him more as Quicksilver? Totally.
Yeah.
Would I have been willing to forgive that? Absolutely. But like, I don't want there to be a portal that opens and have all mutants just walk through. That's a science fiction story.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a story about people, about human beings. Like that's a DC Earth 2 Future's End story. That's not that's not what the X-Men are supposed to be. And to say we need to adapt Hickman's X-Men as the intro, no. Hickman's X-Men is like the end.
Yeah.
It's like the end. Hickman's actually doing an amazing job of like kind of quietly talking about race. Like just recently when they relaunched the new X-Men title under, I think, Duggan, they built a kind of embassy. There's like a treehouse in the middle of New York, and and Ben Urich writes this really, really sweet article where he's just kind of like, why do you have a problem with this? And it's like it is a reaction to everyone's like to where the X-Men have been pushed over the last since they started.
Yeah.
And so it is actually kind of a really cool kind of touchstone to today's culture and how we deal with race and sexual orientation, but it's also a dope ass science fiction story with robots and stuff. And yet it's also like it's the end of the X-Men story. Like you can't start at that point because they haven't been pushed there yet.
Yeah.
You need them to show up and be like, we're superheroes like those guys. Like, not you.
Well, and that's the other really cool thing about that you get to do with X-Men being part of the MCU is you get to tell that part of like, why do they dress that way? So they can be accepted by society as superheroes. That actually means something now because the Avengers existed.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, if they just showed up in their civvies, it'd be like scary. But because they wear ridiculous costumes, it's like, oh, I know what that looks like. And I have a lunchbox with that on it.
Yeah. Like, and we're good to go. And so, and then you can touch on some of Grant Morrison's stuff with the idea of branding if you want, like if that's something that applies to the story. But I think I hope they realize that the X-Men aren't just a cool new toy that they get to play with, but of all the properties they have, they might be the most meaningful to our moment. And I have hope for that because I was genuinely shocked at how aware of the reality we live in that Falcon and Winter Soldier was.
Yes. And
how willing to engage with it. Not that it's perfect, but the fact that it just in any way like engaged with our
it didn't pretend reality. Like we're just gonna do it. We're gonna do the Sam is Captain America. We're just gonna cover that, but we're not gonna ever address the real world implications thereof. No, he literally ends the show by just being like, everybody shut up and listen for a second because we're gonna talk about how important this is. And I'm like, right on. That's how we do it now, Yeah,
I've never related to an Avenger more than when Sam was in the bank and he couldn't get a fucking loan. Like I was like, oh shit, because I really do appreciate what the MCU has done, but I don't know. Like even Peter Parker's jetting around with Tony Stark. Like there's not a lot of like relatable, grounded people in that version of the universe, so positioning Sam in that way, and it's cool too because thinking back to Captain America, the Winter Soldier, where he first showed up, he was kind of positioned as like the Zettermore. Like I'm just a dude. Like you are all super soldiers and shit, and I'm just the dude. And so like taking that as like, this is who this character is. He's just the normal guy that is somehow now a part of this whole thing. Right. It was a really good angle for the character.
Yeah. I'm shocked that they didn't like quietly jab him with super soldier serum just to kind of make him like able to do anything that Steve could do. They're just like, no, he's just going to be able to do it because he can. Moving on.
Do hope, good for them, that his costume looks exactly like it does in the comics.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing.
Hope that we can prove it a little bit because
It's a
it's
little
not it's not my favorite design.
I am amazed that it wasn't like the Luke Cage tiara moment where it's like he wears it and he goes, "This is really stupid looking," and then he rips it off like 30 seconds later. That they're like, "No, that's the suit."
Yeah,
and
that's
listen.
Good.
It's the suit.
Yeah,
but I
but
have some
now-
notes. I mean, that's
because-
just Cap.
Yeah, because I don't think they really nailed Steve Rogers' suit until like Civil War, and then it's like, oh, this is it. So it's like, hey, listen, we got time.
Yeah, right.
If
He's
you
got
want
a couple more
movies,
movies.
yeah, we can figure it out. We did the comic thing. That's great. Those will make those fans happy. But maybe we could tweak. Maybe
we dialed the opacity or the saturation down just a little.
Yeah, a little bit. I also think it would be cool to like. Find a way. Obviously, if you're Falcon, that's your jam. You're going to want to keep the wings. But when I see him, it just looks like Falcon with Cap shield. And when I see Sam Wilson now, I want to think Captain America. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so like maybe you can have it be like the wings are maybe like you make the whole wing setup that's Red Wing now. And so like when he needs to fly, it comes in and latches to a back. And when he's doing Captain America, it goes and flies away. And you get the best of both worlds.
That's fair.
I don't know.
For my money, it's just like if you could have flown before and then you're Captain America now, I'm not gonna give up flying just because I'm also Captain America. Like I could fly. That's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, it's definitely not a practical thing on my it's more of an aesthetic. Like it's a little that's not Cap to me.
Well, you know what you gotta do? You just gotta pick up the actual action figure they made of it because it doesn't come with the wings. That's like the Build-A-Figure. Cool. So the Build-A-Figure is literally weird. I think that figure's wings. So
cool. That's a little odd, but whatever.
Well, the thing is, without the wings, then it just looks it's just like, oh, that's a lot of white on that suit. And, with the wings, it kind of balances it out. Plus I agree with you though, that Falcon Winter Soldier kind of like is Marvel's step forward going like, we're not going to screw up the X-Men. I promise. I mean, the fact that they didn't fast track anything, like there's at any point, they could have been like, there could have been in that flashback for Wanda where we see her parents could have easily been like, it's Magneto.
Yeah,
like
moving on. Yeah,
we're gonna make $1 billion next year with our X-Men movie. We're just gonna fast track this. Danny Radcliffe's gonna be Wolverine. Moving on. Who cares? Yeah, and it's like no. They're like, well, maybe X-Men like 2026. I'm like 2026. That's in 5 freaking years. We're never gonna see Wolverine fight Captain America or anything. They're like, no, you're probably not. Like, oh no, but Wolverine's gonna be really cool, and X-Men's gonna be really responsible.
Yeah, don't worry. Like, he'll show up in a What If or whatever. Like, what if the X-Men were around when the Avengers were around or whatever? You know what I mean?
We'll get a cartoon out of it. That'd be fine, I guess.
But I hope the and they don't need to. Like the X-Men is such a big thing. It's like you almost don't need anything else if you've got the X-Men. And I kind of hope that they do like. I think X-Men is a big enough franchise that they kind of create. They do what they're doing with like Ghostbusters and stuff, where it has its own writers' room, like with just a bunch of people from a bunch of different backgrounds, a bunch of different experiences that can all inform that all kind of like can bring their specific expertise and experiences to it, so that X-Men can represent as many people as possible, because that's kind of what they're designed to do. Like that's just the X-Men.
Yeah. It's not like making another Avengers movie.
Yeah.
And it's setting up its own franchises. You could get like, let's say you launch an X-Men movie, you could get 2 Disney Plus series after that, New Mutants and X Factor or whatever you want to do, and it's you've literally created it like a separate, like Marvel, the MCU and like the MC2. Yeah,
you could have like 3 ongoing X-Men movies plus like 5 Disney Plus shows, and you'd probably just be scratching the surface. Let me tell you this though, to give you hope, I think, for seeing Wolverine fight Captain America. I will bet you that the big plan 10 years from now or whatever the next Endgame thing is because how do you possibly top it?
Yeah.
I think you do a version of Secret Wars that, because it's timey-wimey bullshit, you bring back the Robert Downey Jr.'s and Chris Evans and all that for like one big event thing from time. You pick them up from time or alternate universes or whatever. Yeah. And you do your whole big,
totally.
The whole gang gets back together.
That'd be fine with me. Let me tell you. Yeah. I know that I've heard rumors, and based on that, we don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard it from enough like interesting sources that like the folk at Marvel know, like they know the term Secret Wars and they've bandied it around. Like some people have some kind of reverence for like the 84 Secret Wars book.
Yeah.
And probably just because it's like it's super simple, it's super inexpensive, like it's bombastic, but like the background is just what we did with Endgame, where it's just a bunch of rubble. Who cares? So it doesn't cost, it'll cost like $200 million, or I'm sorry, $1 billion. I think Endgame wound up being costing $1 billion, but it made two, so it's
surprise
okay.
Me. Yeah,
because I think they lumped the budget in with Infinity War, so I think like together it cost $1 billion.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
No, it made two, so who cares? Like, okay, you made your money back. It was a good gamble.
Yeah,
but I don't think you can do that again. I don't think you could spend $2 billion.
It's tough to say. Like, I kind of do wonder with all this stuff, like what is the life cycle for this? Like, is it just this forever? Because that doesn't feel like how things work.
It's not how things work. No.
But I don't know about you. I'm surprised that I'm more excited about the MCU than I almost ever have been, because it feels so unpredictable now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like with the introduction of Yelena and Black Widow, we've got Shang-Chi coming out.
Yeah.
And it's just, when I'm watching these the Disney Plus shows, it's like, I kind of don't know where we're going. And that gets me so excited. And we're touching on characters and angles that I just find really interesting. Like, sitting here, like, thinking about how great Zemo is in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and like being stoked that we might get a Thunderbolts. Like, wait, that's you know what I mean? That's a cool place to be in.
It is, and it's that good kind of uncertainty where you're like, I don't think they know either. Like, I genuinely don't think they have like a roadmap. I think they're just kind of like, well, we know we need to, like, there's a formula here, and because it all is. And but we don't have to necessarily plan out like they're gonna fight Doctor Doom in the third act of our 10-year sprawling epic.
Yeah,
like, it's more like, well, we're just doing Disney Plus. We'll make a Ms. Marvel show because it won't cost much to make. Her powers aren't very complicated. The setting is in New Jersey. It doesn't matter. Moon Knight, same deal. And you know what? I kind of always wanted to make a Daredevil show, and we were working on Moon Knight before we got Daredevil back. So whatever. Yeah. And they're just kind of trying out everything and seeing what works and what doesn't. I mean, there are going to be a couple of duds, I'm sure, just by virtue of having done so much and having to do it all. Yeah. But they also know, like, we got to build and we got to have like younger people. I think that's why, like, they're willing to deal with Sony, because they're like, well, if you can't, like, if they had to deal with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, I feel like Marvel been like, nah. Yeah. Like, we'll put him in this one movie, put him in Civil War, keep the Russos happy, and then we're done. Yeah. But now that it's like, well, he's a kid, he can do 20 Spider-Man movies, or he could be Spider-Man in 20 other movies. Yeah. And we made an entire building at Disneyland for him. Mm-hmm. He's not going anywhere, and we'll deal because we know we're planning for the future, and it's the same deal.
And also, he's Spider-Man.
Well, and that's the thing. He's Mickey Mouse for Marvel. Like, what are you doing? Just buy Sony and move on.
Yeah, until we get like things locked down with whatever our Wolverine is. Like, that Spider-Man's our guy. You know what I mean?
That's the biggest one. And I can imagine Marvel. Because they're not. When I say Marvel, I don't mean Marvel Comics. I mean like Marvel Studios, because they're not like Marvel Comics people. They're movie people. I can imagine them going, well, I mean, like, Spider-Man's the big thing, but like at the end of the day, Guardians of the Galaxy was huge, and nobody knows who the hell they are. Like, for all we know, Oscar Isaac's Moon Knight will be the biggest thing ever, and that'll be our cash cow from now on. And we can tell Sony to take a hike. Yeah. But I think that, like, they're skewing young Hawkeye, everybody, Ironheart, just
banking hard on Young Avengers. Yeah,
exactly, and just for the longevity. Yeah, and also because, like, then. You've got the next generation, they've moved on, but then it'll be all the more crazy and amazing when we go back and grab, like, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, all the Chris's, and
all the Chris's. We get all the Chris's back. I'm on the live show we did today with my co-host Rocky Sustryer. We were talking about Black Widow, and I'm actually wondering if they're building towards like a Young Avengers versus a Dark Avengers / Thunderbolts.
That'd be okay with me. I'm down. I mean, from the trailers for Shang-Chi, Abomination's in it, so we know he's, connected and has his, faculties, so he could easily, and because, Tim Roth is Tim Roth, but he doesn't need to ever power down.
Yeah, exactly. We could literally get anybody. I mean, same thing we did with Red Skull in
Yeah.
Infinity War. It's like we don't need to get Hugo Weaving back
Well,
for that.
well, no, I mean we'll just do a bad Hugo Weaving impression. But
Yeah.
with Abomination, it's like, yeah, well, he's literally physically changed from his look in Incredible Hulk to now, and his vocal cords changed too. Now he sounds like somebody totally different.
he's a giant monster person.
He sounds like Tom Kenny now. Moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I'm into it. I'm down.
Right. But yeah, so we've talked about Marvel a lot, and I kind of feel bad. I know we were talking about independent comic books and everything, but you know, which is hardly the same thing in any way.
Yeah.
But my point originally was when you talked about like adaptations of these works, you know, like when you find something that's like irreverent and subversive, like Preacher or any number Sandman. I remember when they used to announce these like adaptations, it was kind of like, oh god, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And I remember when they announced Preacher, I'm like, you can't. There's no way they're going to do Preacher right. And it's been split for me. Like, I agree with myself. I know that the culture at large is like, I love Preacher. I think it was great. And I'm like, it's not even close to what the comic book used to be.
Yeah.
But what do you think about what they're going to do with Sandman?
It'll be interesting. It's tough because it's such a specific story. It's similar to Watchmen, although it's more sprawling, and Sandman's connected enough to the DC universe that like you get a little bit more leeway.
Yes.
I don't know. I think part of my uncertainty is I actually don't know the creators behind it involved in the adaptation.
Yeah.
And that's like a key, like, okay, are you, you've got to like, I think a lot of times you're just adapting this stuff, but you've got to like connect to the source material and kind of understand, what makes it work. And it's almost like translating a language. You're translating it from one language to another language. It's kind of one of the things that it's interesting, having watched I've mentioned this on other shows too, watching all the Netflix shows, and no matter how much you love the Netflix Marvel shows, I imagine most people came out of them going like, that season was a little bit too long. And the Disney,
all of them,
and the Disney Plus shows kind of have the reverse, where I've coming out of them like, you could have used more, specifically with Loki. I've been enjoying Loki, but like when it comes to Sylvie and her enchantment powers, it's almost like, well, what does that mean for the character? It's like, well, she was Enchantress in the comics. I get that. Yeah. Outside of the comics, for this character, why is enchantment her thing? What does that say about her? What are the mechanics of that? Like, as a person, and so like, I think when it comes to Sandman, I think if casting alone shows me that they really get like who these characters are, like the people they're cast, I think are really like on point for what the characters represent in the story and their personalities. And you can see so many of these actors I can really see embodying these roles. So that gets me really excited. But the thought of like, okay, this was what Neil Gaiman was doing. How does that translate to today? How does that translate to TV? What story are we trying to tell?
Yeah.
To motivate what these people, as opposed to like, well, he's doing it because in the comics that's what he did. It's like, okay, well, but beyond that, what are you?
But why are we doing it now? And don't tell me it's because of the money. Like,
because of the money, and that's a weird thing too, because like, is there that much money in Sandman? Like, it's got like the clout, but like, are people gonna
go see it? Like, do people care?
Like,
it's the same.
It's like when they made Blade Runner 2049. It's like, you all remember, like, I love Blade Runner, but you all remember that it didn't make money, right?
Right. It's like when they rebooted The Thing, bomb in the box office. And they did it again.
I think
Blade Runner, by the way, great sequel. Like,
great sequel, but it's like it doesn't.
And no one saw it again.
And it's the same thing with Dune. We hired the same director to do Dune, and it's like, do you think people are going to show up for Dune? Like, what do you, in your brain, what do you think you're doing?
Right. Yeah. And I know that you like had and with Dune, it's like, we locked it down for at least 3 movies. And I'm like, cool. Are you going to get 3? I feel like you're going to get 1. They couldn't get the Maze Runner going, dude.
Yeah. I'm all for it. I think Villeneuve is a really talented director. I think the cast is great. I think Dune's a cool story.
Yeah. I think it'll be gorgeous, but
is it gonna do what you think it's gonna do? You know what I mean?
Like, does it mean as much to them as it does to you?
Yeah.
And I think you're right about Sandman, where it's like, is it gonna hit? Like, and is it? I feel like Sandman is inexorably tied to the time when it came from. Like, I feel like if you add like cell phones and like
Maybe.
Today's cultural consciousness, I don't know if it translates, but I'm interested to see it. It's like what they did Watchmen, the HBO show. Like they go, if you did Watchmen today, it wouldn't work. Yeah. So we're just going to do a sequel to Watchmen.
Right, we're going to do a sequel to Watchmen, and it's an interesting point because also, I think that was a big issue I had with the It movies.
Yeah,
is that you right at the beginning you've got Richie at the kid that gets eaten as Richie, right? No,
no, it's
no.
Oh God, what's his name?
Anyway, the little kid, Richie, beep Richie. Sorry, I'm mixing up.
Richie, yeah, no,
yeah, I'm mixing up which kid gets eaten by a clown. But like the little kid at the gutter, looking at the gutter, and it's the 80s, right?
Georgie,
and so not only is in mid sentence where this Pennywise is trying to seduce this kid down into the sewer, are his eyes going gonzo and like dribble, and it's like, what is wrong with
what child would be enticed by this?
but also when he starts talking about the circus, you want to go to the circus, I'm like, this is in the 50s.
No,
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense as a lure in the 50s.
Right.
In the 80s,
I got a different relationship down here.
Yeah, we have a different relationship with the circus. It's not like we're amped on the circus, and the movie doesn't do the work to like justify it within the new time frame. It's just like, well, Stranger Things made money, so we need to set it in the 80s. And so it's like, I think that's another really good point, is you have to be aware of how does the time frame change stuff? What is specific to that time frame? It's all about like you just have to engage with the story, and it's something that was really important to us when Jane and I were writing Hellbent.
Yes,
was like, what are the rules to the magic, so that it's not just like, you know what I mean? Like it's got to be tangible. It's something this is a weird reference for my mature supernatural horror comic, but Avatar: The Last Airbender, I think, did a really good job by tying its the rules are very specific. There's you've been the 4 elements, and then you can play around with those rules, but there's those 4 elements, and you tie it to physical martial arts. So there is a physical, tangible thing you're doing. So when a character says, I'm training, it's not like,
I'm concentrating harder. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
How do you train in magic?
Yeah, there's an actual thing you need to do. So like breaking down like how the magic works, what it represents, not just like we're not at a point in the story where we deal with like werewolves and vampires and whatever. It's not like if you were to use a silver bullet, there's a reason
it's silver
that works.
Yes.
And it's not just because, well, that's the rules. Like that's not going to cut it. We need to justify it within the story why silver matters in this context.
Exactly.
It's like when you find out, like originally with vampires, you stake them through the heart. The idea was you're staking them to the ground so they don't get up again. And now it's become like you hit them with wood in the chest and they blow up into dust. Like,
right. Yeah. No, we got a repeating crossbow from the 1480s, and
yeah.
It's just wood. Yeah. No. The rules are really important, especially when it comes to mythology, magic, and any kind of like otherworldly fiction. It grounds your world, and then once you establish your rules, you can literally do anything. Like your audience is more willing to forgive you or forgive any contrivances or odd like moments because they understand they're on the same wavelength as the people who are living in the world they're reading.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like our world has rules, so even in a fantastical setting, you want that level of it has stakes. It now has stakes, and I know what the ground rules are, and there's stuff that can happen. I had very mixed feelings about Tenet. Christopher Nolan's new movie.
Sure, I never saw it. I heard enough. I was like, nah.
It has some really cool stuff, but it
makes sense.
He fully disappeared up his own butt, like into the concept. Like I don't. Anyway, the final action sequence is. I watched an explainer video that was almost as long as the movie trying to explain it, and it was so like, this doesn't.
That it didn't work.
This tracks right. Anyway, but. A moment I really liked about it is minor spoilers. The thing they're trying to stop is, obviously entropy. The gimmick of the movie is entropy works backwards. The thing they're trying to stop is the people in the future basically want to flip time. So time starts moving towards where things were better. And the main character was like, would that even work? And the person he's talking to is like, I don't know, but they believe it would. And I'm like, I buy that because how many lives have been ruined because of nonsense that people in power think will work. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that even though it doesn't necessarily make sense, it makes sense in a very it doesn't make sense in a very human way.
Right. It makes sense to you, and that's all that matters. Like, that's all it needs to do. That's a really great hook. I like that a lot, because it's I think I love that analogy of like how many lives are ruined. And then of course you have cottage industries built from that. It's like you have like you know, from the head that believes it for no reason to the body that says, you know, like, I know he's wrong, but I can make money because, like, and exploit what his belief is. Like, you can create an entire society out of that. And that's,
we spend a lot of time like trying to justify, like explain like why evil people do what they do, but mostly it's just petty selfishness. It's not really that complicated. Like we do, every individual does petty bullshit every day. Imagine if you were a billionaire, and then your petty bullshit now affects millions of lives.
Exactly. It's just your petty bullshit affects like your immediate circle, but if your immediate circle affected millions of people, it'd be more impactful. It affects your immediate circle, and so there's an opportunity for them to literally look you in the eye and be like, "Hey, man, cut it out." And you're like, "Okay." Imagine if it was everybody, and also you never had to interact with any of them. Like you would do awful things. Yeah, you had a tower that loomed above them, and they could never reach you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're great. It's like you're flying around in a space army that might have the wealth, be the combined wealth of multiple worlds, and you're like, hey, what if I just got rid of half the people? Would that? I'm not going to worry about systematic issues or any of that stuff. Maybe I just got rid of half the people. That might make sense to you, even though it's nonsense.
Right, and actually borderlines personality disorder.
Yeah. And there's nobody that you're a giant purple dude with a double-bladed sword. Nobody's going to talk you down.
No one's gonna. The ebony maw isn't gonna be like,
wait a second,
why don't you double the resources?
Maybe.
Just make space bigger. No,
just make space bigger. Or like Thanos checks in later, like, oh, how are things going? Well, it's like, well, actually, because of the way things worked, there's half the people. But everything that was left just went to the rich people. It just went, it all went to the. We're actually more broke. Somehow we're more broke. Than we were when you did this.
I guess I should have been called on my shit. Well,
whatever.
News, though. Well,
it's not like Tony Stark was going to point out this issue to me.
No, he was not. I got armor to make. But
man, he's got all that armor. Hulkbuster armor doesn't pay for itself.
That's right. Not my nanotech armor that could approximate clothing and hats.
Yes.
Anyway,
but that's if you're into that stuff, we, like with Hellbent, hellbentcomicbook.com. That's we tried to put in the work to make it a grounded, believable experience. Tell stories that represent and include people that aren't normally represented and included in comics. But also we like the same things you like. So there's people. Nick has a flaming sword that he chops up people with, and there's well-endowed horse demons, and there's cursing, and there's sex, and there's fantastical drugs and stuff like that. It's all in there. You know what I mean? It's because we also live in the world with you. So
right. That's great. And I love that it's born from this place of you have a story to tell, but you also know the language you're manipulating. Like, this is the language of comics, and you know it, you come from it, and you got something to tell.
Well, I assume it's similar to you when you're writing, like you try to think about the medium that and how it's communicated, and how, like, so when I'm writing a movie script, it's just different. It flows differently.
Totally.
Than a comic. And of course, and there's also like a lot more. I wouldn't say a lot more. It's just different when you're working with a comic. Like, you'll write it one way, and then the artist gets you the pages. You're like, oh, this is work. Is this
absolutely?
Oh, you know what I mean? And then you kind of talk about that, and you figure it out. And
when you write your own, when you write your scripts, you direct them usually too, right? So like you could come up with a new shot, or you probably come up with like another way to tell the story, but you're also telling the story from the perspective of a director. So you're like, I pretty much know how the scene's going to look. With a comic book, you're just like, you have to break it down by panels, which sucks because it's tedious and frustrating. But also, like you said, like the artist will come back and be like, yo, do you mind if we drop one panel, change this one thing, or just let me show you what I'm thinking? And it's like, I never thought of that. I couldn't even reach that level.
Well, because I think the thing is, like, no matter what medium you're working in or who you're collaborating with, the goal is to collaborate with people that are smarter and better than you are, because it just makes you look better.
That's the trick. That is legitimately the trick for life. If you want to be better, surround yourself with better people. Smarter people. You want to And if you want to have a better product, you have to be the lowest person in the totem pole. Like, I am the worst. I am the weakest link in this chain. Everything else is just like elevating what I do. Yeah. That's right. Well, I'm really looking forward to checking out Hellbent. I'm going to pick it up myself. You should too. If you have a chance and you have some scratch, jump into the description or in the chat, and you can click the link and check it out. DJ, where else can people find you and subscribe?
Yeah, so hellbentcomicbook.com is the main thing. If you want to see me tweeting about it, I'm at DJ Talks Trash everywhere that matters. If you want to check out my podcast with Roxy Stryer, that's Only Stupid Answers, and that's at Only Stupid Answers everywhere that matters. But on Twitter, you're going to want to yank the vowels out of stupid because there's a character limit. So
damn it.
Yeah. Character limits. Yeah. But that is where I'm at to check out all this stuff.
Dope. Well, DJ, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you guys next time. You know what? Really quick, let me just jump in. We had 2 super chats and they had a couple of questions. Do you want me to throw them to you?
No, absolutely.
Josh Truckle says, so cool to see DJ. Loved you on SourceFed. So cool to see you here on ComicPop with Sal.
Thank you. Many moons ago. SourceFed was many moons. Go to Only Stupid Answers.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't go to the other one. That's
a lot of my SourceFed buddies. They'll drop by and say hi.
Nice. Hardy34 says, hey guys, how did you, if at all, get your own head about putting out your own work? I've spent 10 years hopping in and out of ambulances and EMT, but the thought of self-publishing my own comic excites and terrifies me. Thank you. It's a great question.
Well, yeah, thank you for your work as an EMT. If I understood, that's great work. It should excite you and terrify you. It is hard. It is hard and not fun. My people ask me, like, what's your advice for creators? And my advice is, if you can see yourself doing literally anything else, do that.
Yeah.
Do whatever if there's something else that brings joy to your heart, pursue that instead.
Totally.
But if this is it for you, and you're not an artist, that's a whole, I can't speak to that experience because I am not an artist in that way. Be ready to, if you're planning on doing if you're planning on doing anything, honestly, be prepared to put your money where your mouth is. And then, be prepared to pay even more with your time. Time is money. So you're going to put a lot of time in. Yeah. And you just, for me, everybody has their own, you can speak to this. I'd actually really like to know your thoughts on this as well. Sure. But for me, everybody's own system. For me, I have to create habits, and I have to create like a pattern, and I have to create like, if I can create a habit or a work schedule, that kind of rigidity, and obviously there's flexibility in that works for me. And so you just have to kind of hunker down, and there will be days that you don't feel it. Yep. And that'll be tough because I don't have a solution for fixing that. No. So either you just kind of have to muscle through and dick around and write stuff that you're going to
not read or ever use.
And don't get lost in the, like, it has to be print worthy the second you put it on the page. It's going to be trash. It's going to be trash. You're going to rewrite it. It's more important to get it out there. Also, and just a practical sense, I don't know about you, Sal, but I start off with a treatment, like a basic outline. I typically write in a 5-act structure. So nice. I use that. And then I expand off the treatment to a script, and so on and so forth. Nice. And so it starts small. You write down notes as they come to you, and then you just kind of like massage it until it's a thing. I also usually do I do a lot of upfront work, character sheets, like who this person is, the story. Yeah. So that way, like, if I get in a conversation with somebody, I know what they're going to talk about because I know their story. Yeah. A lot of that stuff. It's a lot of time. Whatever system works for you, find that, and then you're just going to need to muscle through until it's out there. And then if you want to do a comic, once you have the script, you're going to need to find an artist. There's going to, and so in that sense, you can go to sites like Instagram, DeviantArt, anywhere artists congregate and just kind of browse. Or if you go to conventions, that might be becoming a thing again soon. Yeah, you can meet artists there. and just talk to them about their rate and be cool. Like, don't get like, well, you want how, remember, this is their job.
Yes.
This is their job. And you would want to get paid for, you're the one asking them, unless you got a buddy that's willing to go in with it, with you, and you split whatever profits. There probably won't be any, just heads up.
Exactly. Don't do that. Like, if you have a friend who draws, don't do it, because they have their own priorities and their own lives, and like you want to have it be like a collaborative monetary relationship where it's like, I'm paying for this, you deliver, because otherwise it gets really wrapped up in the personal stuff, and it's like, you really can't let that happen.
Yeah, and not to get into weeds, but to that note, I've now at a point, like, contracts are a good thing. Having agreements are a good thing. So that way everybody, and it's not nothing it's just so everybody knows what everybody else is bringing to the table. And so if there ends up being a dispute, you all know where everybody stands.
Yes.
Yeah.
The contract is really, I've never had to pull the contract. I've actually only been screwed, but like, the contract is there as a reminder of what you promised to deliver.
Yeah.
You know, it's just an affirmation thereof. So, so maybe actually is a kind of scare tactic to be like, oh man, I really don't feel like doing this. I do have a fucking contract. I really shouldn't welch on this.
And if you need help with that, I think it was Charles Soule who did a blog post, like a 5-part blog post on like rates, and because he worked as a lawyer, and that was a good, like, I have a lawyer, but like, that's a good jumping off point if you want to get that. And I know all that stuff is scary. And it can be, and it can be, and that's why I'm saying, like, you need to. It can be fun to think like, oh, I'm just gonna do. It's not fun.
I'm gonna create. I'm an artist. Yeah. But you're creating for money.
Yeah, when I was just sitting down and going through the script again for to send it to the letter, it was like, oh, this is why I do this, because it brought me so much joy. But it can be really, really tough, and it's work, and that's okay. You just need to know that going in. But what about you? What's your system?
My system is less of a system. I remember when I decided to get into writing, I just kind of just sat and write, and I loved that process, just sitting and creating and just seeing what comes out. And I've tried like so many different methods, and I love the idea, and I think that's actually a more successful method is to like have it all planned out and have the character sheets and design and like, you know, beginning, middle, and ends. Like, what's this character want? What do they need? Where are they ending up? I can never do it. I don't know where they're going to end up. And I only know when I'm taking them on the journey as I'm taking them. Like, I go with them, and then I get there eventually, or I don't. And I go like, this is going nowhere. And then I just scrap it. But I find that like the process of just writing is exhilarating, and just like exploring people, and then being like, I don't like that. Or like, would they say this? Or would I want them to say this? And then exploring that experience. It's much more arduous. It's a lot longer. I don't recommend it, but that is what gives me the joy that I get from writing. And I'll also say that when it comes to creating your own comic book and anything that's going to be multimedia, you need to be you need to never be more honest with yourself than then. Like, honesty is the most important thing, and it really has to be, because I've seen so many, and this is why I praised the art in your book, because it is industry level quality, and there are a lot of Kickstarters out there. There's a lot of self-published books out there, and I know a lot, like I've seen a lot of self-published works, seen a lot of big 2 published works that don't have industry level quality art, or not industry level quality lettering or inking or printing. And it's like, you need to be honest with yourself and say, like, if I saw this on the rack, would I buy it? And not just because it has your name on it, not because it has the concept you like so much, but like, is it industry level? And that's like the question you have to ask yourself when you're courting artists, when you're getting people. You know, I know for a fact you will be so excited to get something off the ground that you will take anything. Once you get an agreement or any kind of affirmative response, you'll just jump on it and go. And it's like, that is not necessarily the right way to go. And it's like, you need to be honest with yourself and with them about like your expectations and about what it is. If it looks halfway good, then you can't do it. Because if it's halfway good now, it'll be 100% bad when it's done for you in your mind. Like, when you're looking at it, like I've done so many different projects, and like some of them I'm like, that looks pretty damn good. And some of them I'm like, I wasn't ready. That wasn't there yet.
Yeah. And there's also like a learning process. Like, I know I've got a lot of comedian friends, and they talk about like the 10 years it takes to like get good and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, don't be afraid, you know, when you're experimenting with this stuff and you're pursuing this stuff, but like, just as a point of context, like where I'm at now.
Yeah.
I only pursue projects that if this was the only thing that anybody ever read from me, I would be cool with that.
Right.
Because it takes so much out of you that it's like, I can't do this with something that's like, oh, this will be fun. Like, no, it has to mean something to me.
Totally.
Because then if it means something to me, hopefully it'll mean something to you, because I like to view art as it's you're communicating with somebody. Like I've mentioned this before. I think it's Pixar that they have the rule, like you give your audience 2 + 2 and they let them come up with 4, because then it's a conversation. You're not just preaching at them. You're saying, like, you're presenting some ideas and some scenarios, and then the audience is taking and seeing what they can pull from that and pull from them. And so these people that you'll never meet probably and never talk about in person, you're having this conversation with them that hopefully they walk away with something. But I think you can only do that if it's like something that really means a lot to you, or you feel like you have something to say.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is so much that I've done where number one, I'm glad I created so much earlier, where I'm like, I threw out all of it. Because number one, it was like before, indexing. And number two, it's I can feel me preaching or being, no, you don't get it. Like, while the story's happening, like, no, this is what the story is. Don't own it.
Yeah.
You're experiencing what I'm telling you, and it's like, what I'm telling you is banal, one-dimensional, and and someone else has said it better, or don't bother saying it because they know better than to say it. And it's like that you need to be, like I said, honesty I think is like number one, and it's just honesty with yourself and with the process. You gotta be willing to be like no, or to wait. You have to, because otherwise, and I understand, you're 45 years old and you're like, I'm never going to do this. I work at Allstate and I'm just it's like, yeah, man. And guess what? It's going to cost you $3,000 or $4,000 to get your first issue off the ground. Oh my God. I don't have $3,000 or $4,000. I don't have $100. Like, yeah. Now, do you want to do it? If you don't do it.
Yeah, don't. I don't. Yeah, and just, it's not me trying to deter anybody, but like, if other things make you happy, do those things, because it's tough. It's tough, and it's not a system built for people to succeed. No, it is. The comic book industry is actually fascinating, and that's why I love it so much, but not necessarily because I like applaud it and laud it. It's more like I find it fascinating. It's like it's a brilliant and interesting like case study, because it's so insulated and yet so ubiquitous and like far reaching, and yet so gatekeepy, and yet so inclusive. Like it's this beehive of contradictions, and it's a fascinating organism. Like with the film industry, it's like, I want to break into the film industry. Okay, well, good fucking luck. With the comic industry, maybe. And that maybe, how many independent filmmakers were there after Clerks or Pulp Fiction, and spent tens of thousands of dollars and years of their lives to find out that they didn't really want to make movies. They just wanted to be heard. It's the same deal with the comic book industry, where it's like, but I can't do that, but maybe I could get that. And it's like, it's half the cost, double the time, and the same level of reward. So you got to be real about that too. It's just like, just thinking about it, because I've done both. I want to make movies, I want to make comics, and it's like being real about it and just going through it. So and don't get into comics if you expect to get money out of it. There's a reason every comic creator wants Netflix to adapt their show, and that's so they can actually get pay rent. There's a reason why Jeff Lemire had a Kickstarter, why Scott Snyder has Kickstarter, why James Gunn for it. Like, if I can, because the thing is, Boom, in IDW, Image, whatever, they're going to publish their book, but they need to get the book that they own in the hands, and like, it's an ever shrinking portal. I think, if I have like 6 or 7 IPs, that are in my head, and I'm like, man, if I could sell one of those, because I think the door's closing, because I think that, like, as the stream wars end, we're gonna get like fewer people being like fewer studios and formats willing to dump millions of dollars into an unknown property that has like 10,000 Twitter followers. Just because it has 10,000 Twitter followers, though. Like that might be a thing. Or like it won this award that is prestigious in the comic book industry, an industry I have no knowledge of or understanding thereof. But I might be able to make something out of that. And that's like, I mean, Sweet Tooth came out 20 years ago? It's a little long in the tooth. Right? But so it's like there's a reason why
I mean, look at and the royalties, of course. Like Jim Starlin made less on any Marvel movie, and he created Thanos than he ever did on like a Suicide Squad movie for like an ancillary character that he created.
Yeah, and that's that's why a lot of people invest in their creator-owned work and stuff
Yeah,
like
right.
that too, because that's if they're gonna make money, that's where
How they're gonna do it.
Yeah, it's either that or maybe make a cameo in one of the Marvel movies and get the royalties from that.
Yeah, you get $10,000 a year for that.
I think it was my buddy Hector was like, yeah, with that, we should just give all these creators cameos because it's literally the least we can do.
That's nice.
Yeah,
I mean, like, yes, it is the least you could do. Yeah, and at the most part, they really just get like invitations to the premiere, maybe.
Yeah, and yet, if Marvel knocked on my door and was like, "Hey, you want to write Venom?" I'd be like, "Oh,
Done.
yes, I do. Actually, I do."
Yeah, I'll pay you nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please pay me nothing and take all my ideas to be used for a movie, just so I can be like, I wrote Venom once.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's the thing, is that's comics, right? That's like that desire to be like, and you know what it is? And for me, I think this is what it is. And it might be a little hyperbolic, but like, I think comics are like the new religion and mythology. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, can you imagine if somebody said like, hey, you know, the Bible, I wrote a chapter in the Bible.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, if I could, and not like one of those like Gospel of Thomas. Like I'm talking about like the real Bible, the one that everybody gets.
Yeah, exactly. One that's canon.
Yeah, the NRSV. Like that. But like, could I write a Spider-Man backup in one book? Yeah. And it's like, and that's there forever. Yeah. Amazing Spider-Man 947.
Yep.
That's me right there. And I added to the cultural world of that character. And it's like, maybe that immortality is something people are chasing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And Dylan Wheeler mentioned, I gave him a pep talk. He found himself that he's 12 weeks clean and sober. We're not going to be doing Ambush Bug on back issues, but thank you very much for your support, man. No, Ambush Bug is not. I barely will do like Doom Patrol on back issues because of how like obscure it is, despite the fact that it has like a award-winning TV series and people love that show.
I love Doom Patrol. Well, I love Doom Patrol the show. I also have the whole Grant Morrison omnibus.
Oh, totally. If you haven't, you've got to check out the Gerard Way, Nick Darrington run.
No, obviously, it's super good. Yeah, and it was weird. Like I reading Umbrella Academy and then like watching the show, like, oh yeah, this was just his Doom Patrol. Yeah. he just wanted to do Doom Patrol. That's all this was.
That's it. Yep. Well, that's it. DJ, thanks again for doing this. I appreciate you staying for an extra couple of minutes.
Yeah, not a problem.
And we will see you guys next time with another episode. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to everything the DJ has and check out his Kickstarter because we're a dream factory here, ladies and gentlemen.
You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
So long, everybody. Thanks a lot for watching.